Do you want to learn more on how to put money to work in regenerative food and agriculture? Follow our video course via investinginregenerativeagriculture.com/course or in the links below. Now, on to the podcast. A conversation about scale and business and the key role of decentralized processing in regenerative agriculture. Our guest has launched an investment firm, first investing their own capital into accelerating regenerative farming. If the food grown with regenerative practices doesn't taste amazing and if it doesn't make more money, we will never reach the impact we need. Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, investing as if the planet mattered. A podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. In March last year, we launched our membership community to make it easy for fans to support our work. And so many of you have joined as a member. We've launched different types of benefits, exclusive content, Q&A webinars with former guests, Ask Me Anything sessions, plus so much more to come in the future. For more information on the different tiers, benefits and how to become a member, check gumroad.com/investingregenag or find the link below. Thank you. Welcome to another episode. Today with Ed Byrne of Soil Works Natural Capital. Is a public benefit company on a mission to accelerate the regenerative food movement by helping to launch scalable, repeatable businesses that fuel the regenerative economy. Welcome, Ed.
Hey, thanks for having me.
To start with a personal question, why soil? What does an Irish man end up in Texas working on regenerative agriculture?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know how far back you want me to go, but when my business partner Lou and I started looking, we both have a passion for farming. I can talk about that if you like, but when we started looking at it and getting a bit more interested in, should we do something here? Why is food quality getting worse, even real food quality getting worse? And, why are westernized economies, as they get more money, why does the health go down and obesity go up and diabetes go up? And as we've kind of dug into the space, you realize, it's Michael Pollan's great line. It's not what you eat, it's what you ate. And you dig a little bit deeper in there, and I'm sure you've done this yourself, and you realize, it's not just the quality of what they eat, it's how it's grown. And ultimately, it all boils back to the soil. Right? If the soil is no good, the crops, the grains, the grass are not going to be any good. And it's logical when you think of it. It's just, I probably had never gone quite there before. And when you realize, okay, it's all about the soil, and then, you dig a little deeper and realize, that UN stat of we have 65 harvests left, obviously, that's a big number to throw out there, and not true in every part of the world. But it is quite scary how much topsoil we're eroding and how our practices are just making it worse and worse. And then when you dig in a little more and realize, there's this regenerative agriculture thing. It's easier on the land. It's got less inputs for the farmers, so it should be a more profitable business. And it restores soil, takes carbon from the atmosphere, and makes higher nutrient quality or nutrient dense food. And it's not mainstream. So as you dig in, you realize this is a real opportunity and need. And is there something we can do here? And we looked around and talked to some farmers, and we believe there is. And it's great that there's more and more people doing it. And hopefully we can be a little bit of help.
And the analysis of the broken food system and obviously the potential of regenerative agriculture, many would share, but you didn't stop there. You went into action mode. But let's ask a question first. Was there one moment you suddenly saw the potential, or was it more a gradual process?
Yeah, I'd love to say there was a light bulb moment, but I think I've always, I'm from Ireland, obviously, and I spent all my summers and holidays on family farms, and my business partner Lou has a ranch here. And so, I always had an idea that at some point I'd run a farm, even if it was a hobby project or something in my retirement. And, the more I started looking into it, and Dan Barber's book, The Third Plate, is just fascinating. As someone who likes food, forget farming, it's fascinating. And you look at, I love the approach he takes, which is all about the quality and taste for consumers. And we can talk about that later, but I think that's really important. And I think that's what will drive this movement to a degree. And then Michael Pollan's book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, introduced me to Joel Salatin. I read Joel Salatin and then Gabe Brown. And so I do think it was a gradual progression from an interest to a hobby to maybe there's a business here to there's a whole ecosystem. And, and even now I'm kind of semi-nervous going on a podcast, because the more you dig, every time you look at one article, there's 10 more links and 10 more people and 10 more funds and 10 more companies. And so this space, for better or for worse, is much deeper than I thought, which is, that's obviously better, but worse that so few people know about it. And there is, it is such an active micro community, but it's not, mainstream, it's not even close. I don't even know that it's on that path yet. And I think that's where we need to work on.
And because maybe many would have stopped there, started their own farm, maybe bring forward their retirement a bit and would do that and would stop at that and obviously maybe advocate for things, etc. But you decided to take a different approach, bring a lot of your knowledge that you have in other spaces, mostly technology, to this space. Can you describe a bit that decision? Like you saw the opportunity and then didn't decide to create your own piece of paradise, but actually said, okay, this is something I want to work in and spend a lot of my awake hours.
Yeah, there probably was a semi-light bulb moment on that front. And, obviously I'd love to have a farm and I'm sure I will at some point, but we talked to a lot of farmers and they all said to us, we need guys like you. We need business people in this space. We're great at making food. And I think, farmers all go to farmers markets and sell direct. And I'm not sure that's necessarily what they all love to do. I think it's, chefs are great at making food, but are they all great at running restaurants? And I think independent farmers have to do that, but I don't know if that's what they'd choose to do if there was a better route to market. And we just heard this, it's, we need business people. And so when we look at the whole ecosystem, it's not just, there are lots of small farmers and there are more and more people moving to regenerative. And so me doing that will be a great hobby and hopefully I'll do it and I'll love it, but I'm a business person first. And I do see the opportunity and I'm passionate about it. And I'd like to think that Lou and I can bring what we've done in Scaleworks in the last 5 or 6 years and in our business careers. We can have an impact here. And look, we're business junkies. We love business. And if we can bring our love of business to a space where there's a real mission and we can see a real impact of regenerative agriculture succeeding, then we should.
And can you describe a bit, what is Scaleworks?
So we set Scaleworks up. You can probably guess where the Soilworks name came from. Very original. So we set Scaleworks up 6 years ago because in the software space, we saw that there was a lot of great product companies being built by engineers and funded by VCs. And they had great products, but not great routes to market, not great scalable leadership teams, scalable sales and marketing. And I think a lot of times founders, especially engineer founders, they love building. And that's great. They love building. And then they get to a point, and it's a rare founder who's good at building and scaling. And so in Scaleworks, we acquire, as close to 100% of a company as we can, always a majority, or almost always a majority, and bring in a new leadership team, grow the team, focus on a scalable sales and marketing strategy. And so we've bought, God, I don't know, 8 or 10 companies in the last 5 years, and thankfully it's gone well.
And you were planning and are actually doing that partly with the acquisition of PastureMap, that approach to regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, I don't know that was our day one plan, but it worked out pretty well. It's a good bridge from the software world to the regenerative agriculture world by acquiring a software company. So we know the software space well. Lou was actually a user of PastureMap and he connected with the original founders. And we realized, look, it's a really small business, but we think PastureMap is a big opportunity, not just in, obviously, rotational grazing and pasture management is a huge part of regenerative agriculture, but I feel like that's the kind of the entryway and having, acres that we help farmers manage. Hopefully there's a lot more we can do over time as we work with those farmers. And we know how to do software. We were quickly able to build a software team around it, and hopefully we can, build out the platform. But hopefully that's the entryway for us to connect with farmers and figure out how we can do more on soil, more on carbon, and, generally, build out our network and learnings there.
And because you acquired the full company of PastureMap and have changed the team as they were moving on, and otherwise I think PastureMap would have closed, and you were interested that didn't happen. So what are you changing with them, or what's the next phase in this case for a software company that you've bought completely?
Well, yeah, we bought it completely. I hope it wouldn't have closed. I don't know, but it wasn't a massively loss-making business. It's a small business, but it had a tiny team. So the founders have moved on. There was only, I think, really one other employee, and she stayed with us, and she's great and doing a phenomenal job and hopefully having lots of fun. So we've added 4 people to 5 people to the team since we bought it. And look, step one is, the low-hanging fruit. Talk to our customers. What's the stuff you're frustrated with? And that list is always long. And so we don't need to be business geniuses to pick up the low-hanging fruit and fix the problems that people tell us they've had or they have. And then, look, it's a privilege to have these conversations. And outside of hearing the kind of immediate things they have, is ask what they're doing on their farm. What else can we do to help? And then, ask what are, you can seed ideas. Would you like us to do more on cover cropping? Can we help you manage that? Would you like to do more on soil metering? Do you have soil meters? Would you like to input your data in there? can we figure out how much carbon is being removed into the soil and sell carbon credits? I think there's lots to do in the short term, which is just kind of stick to your knitting and make what we do really solid, better, and grow it, and PastureMap gets a ton of signups all the time, which is great. So it's our job to make sure that we work with all those customers or potential customers and do a good job getting them on board and getting their pastures set up, and then go from there. And look, the community already knows way more than we do. So it's our job to kind of listen and then prioritize, the things you hear lots of times that we can actually do.
So how would you describe Soilworks then? As an entity or as a concept, how would you describe it?
I guess it's an investment entity or company. Our mission is to accelerate the transition to regenerative agriculture, and so we'll, within reason, anything we can add value in, we'll do. I think there's lots of funds and big funds emerging in this space, or at least big funds who are now adding agriculture and regenerative agriculture to their thesis. So I hope we're not just a investor of money, but if we can add value by acquiring a company like PastureMap and bringing our expertise at running businesses to it. If we can start a company, I think we'll start one or two in the next year. We've some in progress already, and if we can invest in some companies where we can bring a business community together and hopefully accelerate them. And I think the power of bringing a small network together could be great. So I think Soilworks is our kind of vehicle to do that, and hopefully we'll build a little bit of a brand, and that'll attract smart people, and we can start having good conversations.
And so far it's been funded by you and your business partner. Are there any plans to take on outside capital and to put other people's capital to work as well?
I should probably have some disclaimers. We're not actually raising a fund now, but if we were, I guess we'd have to do that. So yeah, I think we will. I mean, our capital is not limitless, obviously. My gut right now is that we'll be like Scaleworks. We'll always stay kind of boutique size where we can actually have an impact. But you never know. I mean, this space, I think, especially as farmers have to figure out how to migrate and transition, that could take a lot of money. So if the other funds exist, great. I don't think we don't want to compete with anyone on just dollars in the bank. But yes, I think at some point we'll have to raise money, and we'll figure out, will it be a fund or will it be a company? And I don't know the answer to that yet, but I think we'll do something.
Yeah, and I like to ask this prioritization question, which I always just explain a bit using the ITN framework, which is importance, tractability, and lignitiveness, which I always struggle with. You definitely inspired by the effective altruism community that uses it a lot. I will put a link in the show notes below if you want to know more, but it really looks at importance, like what is the scale of the problem, tractability, how solvable is it, and how many other people are working on it, in a sense, like how much of a difference can you make? If you had to describe your approach to investing in, and obviously being an entrepreneur in regenerative agriculture and food, how would you rank it that? Like, how would you, basically, why did you choose this approach if you would look at those parts?
It's funny when you think about importance, go back to the macros, there's no more important space. I mean, regenerative agriculture helps our climate and our food system. And is there any two bigger problems we have right now than world health and nutrition obviously being such a big precursor to that, and environmental change?
And your approach in that, in terms of bringing that business mind and the scalability or the repeatability as well to the regen ag space where we are now, will that solve a lot of the issues that we are all having in terms of that still it's a super tiny sector and we're sort of fighting for attention everywhere?
Well, I actually think one of the, I won't say issues, but one of the neglected areas so far within the space is that the community is, talks a lot about and is getting better and better at the practices of regenerative agriculture. But I'm a believer that supply follows demand. And right now, I think demand for regenerative produce is, it might not be zero, but it's pretty low because consumers don't know what it is. And if you look at, consumer awareness, I mean, the big trend change is consumer awareness of the importance of nutrition and high quality food is growing and growing, right? And you look at just the growth of organic, and as we all know, organic isn't necessarily great for the environment, or might be better than the opposite method, but still not perfect. And so
it's a good start.
It's a start, yeah, I think.
And in terms of consumer awareness, everybody knows organic. They've done a really good job. We've all done a good job in that.
And I think if we could get regenerative produce or whatever it becomes called to that level of awareness, then supply will follow demand. More and more farmers will do it. More and more farmers will migrate. And so,
okay. So what are your plans there? Because you mentioned we're going to start one or two companies. I'm guessing now that they're going to be in the food space.
I don't know. I have some. I'm not going to share yet. Next podcast. But I don't want to jinx us. So I don't know. Maybe we'll support companies in the consumer space. I mean,
have you seen some in like the food as medicine, the nutrient density? Because it's such a complex story. I see a lot of opportunity there. I absolutely believe that the key to getting consumer demand is going to be nutrient density, healthcare, etc. I haven't seen too many examples yet. Definitely reach out anybody listening that has them, but that like food companies that are built around healthy soils, just very simply. Have you seen some little examples yet? Like, are we getting there?
No, I wish we were. I think this is just such a small space. I mean, look, the farmers market's an example.
Of course. But there you don't know unless you have the bionutrient meter of then Kittredge, which isn't ready yet because there's no database around. You cannot really see, okay, which tomato has been grown in healthy soils.
Exactly. And so, and you can go online to your local farmer, but look, the average consumer, even the average educated consumer about the importance of nutrition is not going to do that. And it's just, it's not easy get, regenerative produce. And then you got to ask the question again, within the regenerative space, is regenerative produce, is that what consumers want? I mean, will the consumer care that you're regenerating your land? I mean, it's great for the environment and the macro view of, this food is good for, it helps someone restore their soil, but is it good for me? I mean, did this come from good soil or soil that was just started regenerating a month ago? And so I don't know the answers to those, but I think until those questions are asked and once we start getting regenerative produce in front of consumers, just like in the software world, they will tell us what works and what doesn't, and we can adapt on the fly. But, when I talk to a friend or colleague or family member about regenerative agriculture, they gloss over it. I have no idea what that is. And the exciting part is when you explain it, everyone is fascinated by it. And then they start kind of their own cognitive bias of, I recognize this. Was there a conference about this? Is this person speaking about it? But then someone says, where can I get this food? And there's no answer to that yet. And so, or there's no good answer to it.
So how would you approach that? I mean, you are now in SoilWorks, obviously, but as nutrient density is so key and it's such a horrible word, what would be the steps there to fastly iterate minimal viable product, like bringing the software spirit and work ethics and approach to that? How would that look like if we apply that to nutrient density?
Well, look, I kind of think of it as a pyramid of sorts. I think the top of the pyramid is taste. I think it's like people don't want to have medicine. Medicine tastes horrible because if it tasted good, you wouldn't believe it would make you any better. And so I think number one is taste. It has to taste. And by the way, real food should taste great. It should taste the best. This is why I think Dan Barber is such a good steward of this community, because he goes straight to, I'm going to make the best food for consumers. And so regenerative produce should be the most tasty food. It should also be the most nutrient dense. And so as a buyer for my family, not just a kind of restaurant goer, you look and say, well, if I'm in the store, I want something that's really nutrient dense and that the kids are going to like. And then I think the third part is, this was carbon negative. Awesome. I feel great about this. I mean, I'm eating meat, which, the world has been telling me is bad for me, but actually is really good for me. It's super nutrient dense. I mean, nothing more I can give my kids is so packed with nutrients. And it's carbon negative. Wow, I feel awesome. And so I think that's the kind of, step 1, 2, 3 that I think, look, we'll see what consumers react to. But, you want to get out there and start getting them to react.
I think that's the approach. Test, and see, real people that put money on the table, either as customers of PastureMap or as consumers in a shop. That's often what goes wrong as well. Like, people develop things in their silo somewhere and the world needs you idea, but then you get out and nobody cares about what you develop. So Getting that minimum viable and getting into real markets, I think, is key. And what would you say, like, to smart investors? Let's say they're all listening to this show. You've made your first steps, actually, your first investments in the space. What would you tell them, obviously, without giving investment advice? All the disclaimers here are true.
Yeah.
To look out for, to look into in terms of regenerative agriculture, as you've been going down the rabbit hole so deeply?
It's a good question. The caveat being advising smart investors assumes that we're smart investors. And so the extra disclaimer that we may not be, and we're just getting started ourselves. So I think when you look, ag tech, especially in Silicon Valley, is ag tech, we're investing in ag tech. And it's the last 100 years of ag tech and the industrialization of agriculture have been about getting more from less. Scale, more from less, more chemicals for more produce. And I think it has to be the opposite of that. It can't be more from less. Obviously we don't want less, but what our current, all the ag tech we're doing now in software for precision agriculture, I just think it's the wrong way. It's just making us worse. And so what we need to do is ag tech. The investments in agriculture need to be on the process and innovation and methodology and logistical side. I mean, this whole ecosystem, if regenerative agriculture is going to succeed, really needs to be rebuilt. We need to go from massively centralized to massively decentralized. And so, how do we change the regulations there to allow that? How do we support many small businesses? How do we build scalable logistics chains that are super decentralized? I think if there's one positive of the current world health crisis, it's that we've seen centralized food systems don't work, and so maybe that'll be an accelerator. And so, look, I would just say things that might not traditionally look like scalable software investments that are very attractive. I think investors need to look at what is the investment ecosystem we can do here, and it shouldn't just be more from less, which is what has got us into this problem to begin with.
And I mean, this is a question that maybe is very relevant in a couple of years, but what if you be in charge of a $1 billion investment fund? How would you break that down, and how would you, or maybe not, maybe put everything in one thing? What would you do with that starting today?
I almost want to say that I wouldn't want that. I mean, I'm not convinced that big dollars make big change. I think, we see that in the software world all the time. The more money companies raise is definitely not a predictor of their success. I mean, just look at the innovator's dilemma, right? I mean, small companies out innovate big companies all the time. And so I actually think, constraints are a great driver of innovation. I think, outside of software, farmers are super constrained financially and by everything else. And look at how scrappy and innovative they are in getting making their farms work. And so if I had to have that much money to spend, I think you could put a lot of it into just how do you finance the transition and the migration? I know you're doing some work on this as it is. And so, how do we give, since the government isn't doing it yet, how do you help farmers move from regenerative or from conventional to regenerative? And then, look, that's a big fund. So I draw the stack of what is the ecosystem in agriculture. And then I think within the current, food system from farmer to consumer, every step along the way is likely to have to change or likely to change. And hopefully, getting the farmer closer to consumer. So outside of quality, the farmer makes more money. I think that, and the consumer doesn't necessarily have to pay more, right? That'd be a nice win-win. And so I think you could look at each part of that ecosystem or that, food system stack or agri-food system stack, and there's innovation going to happen in each area. And so, if you had that much money, you could maybe have lots of little micro funds and pour fuel on each area.
Is there something in all of these different stacks, like basically from farm to fork to plate at the end, something you find most interesting or most exciting at the moment? Because obviously that could change in 6 months or 2 months, etc. Is there something, or you recently discovered that you didn't see or know? Because I agree, every little piece has to change. So it's also difficult to choose where to focus on and what to learn, because they're so different from slaughtering to sending to shipping to processing to growing. I mean, it's all different industry basically and all very complex. Is there something that caught your eye recently in one of those stacks that really excites you?
Yeah, I mean, I think processing is a big area. I mean, like centralized processing, it's semi-uneconomical or untenable really for farmers to compete because they can't get access to centralized processing plants, which means they can't get that economy of scale. They have to go to smaller local state producers who are vastly more expensive. So the meat's just more expensive, full stop, straight away, nothing to do with, quality or anything else. And it's only sellable within state lines. And so I think, decentralized processing, so many small plants and mobile processing, right, on farm, so animals never have to even get into a truck, which is one, good for their quality of life, and two, the quality of meat is often predicted by the stress of an animal, so less stress is going to be good from the top of the pyramid bit of taste. And so while that's technically possible, you want to be able to sell across state lines, and lots of grocery stores will only take USDA inspected. And so how, and I don't know how innovation helps here because technically it's possible, but how do we lobby or get the USDA to change their approach that they'll allow inspections over camera or some other way of doing it, that they don't have to have a person in plant, which just makes the barrier to massively decentralized processing too high and too expensive.
Yeah, just to give a bit of background, in many of these plants, especially the large centralized ones, obviously are closed right now or partly closed because of COVID, because they turned out to be a hotbed. And there always needs to be a USDA person on site when you slaughter. But of course, if you have a very small mobile slaughter unit that travels from farm to farm, it just doesn't make any economic sense that there's a person there paid by the slaughterhouse to see every single animal. But still, you need that in terms of getting into the larger contracts, and they need to be USDA approved. So there's this quadrondrum basically that makes that technically possible, but practically not feasible yet. But of course, maybe in the current situation, there could be movement, because with pressure, everything becomes fluid if it's a big enough of an issue.
Well, and of course, if you actually did get, a massively decentralized processing or mobile processing units across the states or across the world, but say across the US, then the selling across state lines wouldn't really matter, because every state produces enough meat anyway. So by and large, you'd be able to do it that way. So that's one interesting area, I think.
And okay, so we're taking away your $1 billion investment fund, which you didn't want in the first place, so that's okay.
Yeah.
But we give you a magic wand and a magic power to change one thing in, let's say, the larger agriculture industry. What would you do?
Well, I mean, look, the easy answer is just ban all chemicals. Maybe give a 3-year kind of approach, but ban all chemicals. But I think if I had a magic wand, I'd make all consumers know what regenerative is right now and understand it. And then I think demand would drive supply.
And they will start knocking on the door of anywhere where they buy their current food and start asking questions on soil health, etc.
Yeah, and look, the other thing is, I mean, outside of the consumer, I think if I had a magic wand, you want on both sides, supply and demand, especially on investment side, to focus on quality, not quantity. I mean, I said it before, I guess, but we've been 100 years of quantity. Does anyone really believe we have a quantity issue with the amount of food waste? I mean, we don't have a quantity issue. We have a quality issue. And I think every study says that we can make enough quality food with regenerative practices that would solve so many problems. And so if every side of the stakeholder table, from producer, supplier, and consumer, realized quality matters, I think, we wouldn't necessarily have to pay a lot more, because at scale, I think we could make that work. And that would change the world massively.
And we keep coming back to scale. It's also a bit of I wouldn't say dirty word, but some people are scared of scale, because once we're scaling this regenerative agriculture movement, we lose some of the complexity, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say to that, to people that say it shouldn't scale, it should all be small scale, family run farms, and it should actually all be smaller? I
think that can be scaled. I don't think it has to be big farms. I mean, look at Uber. Uber's a massive company, but it's super decentralized. All they are is or Airbnb, or take any of these. They have a central purchasing platform that connects you, or a central platform that connects the consumer to the supplier, right? In which case, sometimes it's me and I want to get a ride to the airport. But why can't we do that for farmers? I mean, why doesn't scale doesn't necessarily mean centralization, especially in the current world we live in, where on my mobile phone I can open up an app and I can order online, or order from a farmer, or have a central store that connects me to local farmers and they deliver the next day. Or I don't know what the solution should be, but I think I absolutely think we should have loads of small farms. I don't think big farms. I think big farms will always have a weird kind of diseconomy of scale will kick in at some point. And maybe this is my own passion, because I like my family are small farmers, and I'd like to be a farmer too. But I think we can. I'd love to see. I think 100 years ago farmers were wealthy, and that now farmers go bankrupt at a scary rate, and so many farmers have off-farm jobs. I mean, what a joke. The most important thing for our health and world is that we can eat. I mean, regardless of the quality of food, we have to eat. And the people producing our food are treated so badly and make so little money. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so I think we can scale the logistics, which means we can have lots of small suppliers, right? So I do believe that decentralized farming can scale. And regenerative can scale because you need less inputs. I mean, the wonderful thing about it is you don't need all the chemicals. So you can be a regenerative farmer at any size and hopefully make money, because your input cost goes way down. Hopefully the quality of your output goes up. Maybe the volume goes up a little bit, and maybe the price you get goes up, either because of the quality or because you've removed so many parts of so many middlemen from the chain. So anyway, long answer, but I think this absolutely can scale, but it can scale, by millions of suppliers.
And I love to ask this question that is definitely inspired by John Kempf, but what do you believe to be true about regenerative agriculture that others don't? Could be the scale one, but could also be a completely different one. Like, what do you believe to be true that others in regenerative agriculture don't believe to be true?
I feel like it's such a leap of overconfidence to say I'm not a regenerative producer myself. We've been in this space for maybe learning it for 2 or 3 years, and saying that there's something that, I mean, every day you learn something new. So look, if I had to pick something, I'd say it is that business is not evil. Regenerative agriculture, it's great that, there should be a fair price, and that, ethics of how we treat animals and farmers are there. But it has to be a business, right? This isn't a philanthropic project. Regenerative farmers have to make money. Consumers have to get high quality food that they demand that they're prepared to pay for. And so, I don't know if that's something that people debate or not, but if they do, then that's my one belief.
Oh, they definitely do. But is that a reason why you picked being a public benefit company and not a foundation or basically a non-profit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's even a question. I mean, like the question was, are we a company or a public benefit company? Right? A public benefit company is a for-profit company that has a mission outside of just creating wealth. And so, but a foundation or a philanthropy has, they give away money. And I mean, giving away money, so it'll help farmers move maybe, but how is that going to create sustainable long-term businesses? If we can't make money at this and we're not going to scale it. It's as simple as that. If consumers don't want it and love it, they're not going to buy it. And if they do, more and more farmers are going to move to it. And then new people look into it. And then other parts of the ecosystem will change. I mean, I think trying to make this a kind of altruistic, don't worry about making money, we'll just make great stuff, will never work. The best way to I won't say beat, but the best way to force the food system to change outside of consumer demand is by business, right? I mean, like there should be profit all the way along, and farmers should make more money than they have ever before. And so I absolutely think this has to be driven by business.
Which I think is a good answer to that question, actually. It's something that definitely many would agree listening to this, and some probably won't. So I think it's a really good answer to that question. And I want to thank you for your time. I think we covered a lot. I don't think it's the last time we talk, because I think as you're so, I wouldn't say fresh in this space, but new, at least to be public about this. I mean, you just bought Pasture Map, you're revitalizing a lot of things. And from the sound of it, you're going to start 1 or 2 companies this year, which I'm very interested in. But whenever that is shareable and open, I would love to check in and see, because I'm super interested in the food as medicine or the tasty food side of things and the consumer side of things, because I think there's the key to, it flips the question to, okay, if we all start asking for this on a large scale, farmers will change and the whole food system will change. And that's a very interesting insight. So thank you for that.
Totally agree. Look forward to chatting again. Thanks very much again for having me on today.
If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3, if this podcast has been of value to you, and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerative agriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much, and see you at the next podcast. Dear friends of the podcast, I'm super excited to share with you the online video course Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food. How to put money to work in regenerating soils at scale and growing a lot of tasty food while doing it. Why are we doing this course? After 100 interviews and more than 100 hours of audio asking the question how to put money to work in regenerating soils, and have been following the space since 2011 and recording these podcasts since 2016, we thought it was time to share our lessons learned. What have we seen in the space over the last years? How have we built our decision-making framework? What to focus on with the podcast? How have we picked interviewees? What questions should you ask? What is happening in the space? What should you read? What should you listen? What should you watch? How to approach this space? For whom is this course? You, the soil builders and investors in the space. The soil builders, people working in this space, entrepreneurial farmers, fund managers, vehicle builders, crowd investing, platform builders, agtech companies, farm-to-gut food companies, permaculture, keyline designers, holistic management consultants, etc., etc. People that are building soil at scale. And the investors who are putting their own money to work through their family office or as private individuals, or people who are putting other people's money to work through foundations, institutional capital, banks, insurance companies, etc. Is this course free? No. This is pay what you think it's worth. Meaning, I have no way of knowing what this course will be worth to you. And I'm very aware that among the listeners of this podcast, we have people with very different means. So I'm inviting you, if this course is creating value to you, and if you have the means, to consider paying what you think it's worth. Thank you. So what is this course? It's currently a series of 17 videos, mostly ranging from 10 to 15 minutes, plus PDF slides, so you don't have to ride along. we're going to look into why invest in regenerative agriculture and why extractive agriculture is so risky, how to invest, what kind of frameworks you could and I think should build, what to invest in, what kind of co-investors you could find, or what kind of investors you could find if you're a soy builder. Every lesson will have a digging deeper part where I will share what kind of reports, what kind of interviews, what kind of videos you can look into if you want to dig deeper. We're going to look at nutrient density, landscape design, and a lot more. So what is it not? It's not a list of investable deals. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in this world. We're really at the beginning of the regenerative agriculture and food revolution. It's also not investment advice. Before making any investment, please find professional investment advice. So get ready, get a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, or whatever you're drinking. Click on the link below, sign up, and I'm really looking forward to your feedback.